A dramatic scene unfolding in court today as lawmakers for President Trump try to keep his taxes out of the public eye. Today, the attorneys urged a federal appeals court in New York to block prosecutors from getting access to Trump's taxes and company business records. This is a case that could soon end up before the United States Supreme Court. And interestingly, this 2016 quote from President Trump's campaign came back up in court today.
The people, my people are so smart. And you know what else they say about my people? The polls. They say, I have the most loyal people. Did you ever see that? Where I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like incredible.
CNN's Athena Jones is with me now, along with Harry Littman, who's...
Okay, so the Department of Justice is in absolute chaos right now. And what just happened is a massive blow to Trump's entire legal strategy. We're talking about multiple senior DOJ lawyers suddenly resigning in what insiders are calling a coordinated protest against the administration's handling of some of the most sensitive legal cases in modern American history. This isn't just about a few disgruntled attorneys walking away from their desks. This is about career prosecutors with decades of experience, people who've served under both Republican and Democratic presidents, deciding they can't defend what the White House is trying to do anymore. And the timing here is brutal for Trump, because these resignations are happening right as his legal team is facing critical court battles on multiple fronts, from the January 6th cases to the classified documents investigation, to various civil suits that could define his presidency and his personal legal exposure for years to come. What we're watching in real time is the institutional credibility of the Justice Department collapsing under the weight of political pressure, and the fallout from this is going to reshape how we think about prosecutorial independence, executive authority, and the rule of law itself heading into 2026. Now look, you can't really trust mainstream media anymore. They'll give you the headlines, they'll show you the press conferences, but they won't connect the dots on what this actually means for the balance of power in Washington and why career lawyers are willing to throw away their careers rather than continue working under this administration. That's why we built Politic Insane, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, make sure you subscribe to the channel right now. We bring the news straight to you every single day. Just hit the subscribe button below to join us. And if you want to support this work and be part of a community that truly cares about the truth, this is your moment. Subscribe, drop a comment below with your take on what this means for Trump's legal standing, and let's build something that actually holds power accountable. All right, let's get back to the video. Here's what happened. Starting last week, at least 7 senior attorneys within the DOJ's Criminal Division and the Office of Legal Counsel began submitting their resignations in what sources inside the department are describing as a coordinated response to directives coming directly from the White House. These aren't junior lawyers or political appointees who come and go with every administration. We're talking about career prosecutors who've been with the Justice Department for 15, 20, sometimes 30 years. People who've prosecuted organized crime, terrorism cases, public corruption. People who understand the law inside and out and who've built their entire professional lives on the idea that the Department of Justice operates independently from political interference. And what triggered this mass exodus was apparently a series of meetings where Trump's political appointees at the top of the DOJ made it clear that they expected these lawyers to take positions in ongoing cases that directly contradicted established legal precedent and prosecutorial ethics. One source told reporters that the breaking point came when senior officials suggested the department should move to dismiss certain January 6th prosecutions on grounds that legal experts say have no basis in law, essentially asking career prosecutors to argue in court that people who've already been convicted or who've pleaded guilty should have their cases thrown out for political reasons. Another flashpoint involved the handling of the classified documents case, where Trump's team has been pushing the DOJ to adopt legal theories about presidential authority over classified material that career lawyers believe are not just wrong, but dangerous in terms of setting precedent for future presidents. And this is where things start to unravel, because when you lose this many experienced prosecutors all at once, you don't just lose their individual expertise, you lose institutional memory. You lose continuity on complex cases that have been years in the making, and you lose the trust of federal judges who rely on DOJ lawyers to present honest legal arguments regardless of which party controls the White House. We're already seeing the immediate effects in courtrooms across the country. In at least 3 major cases tied to January 6th, judges have noticed that the lawyers representing the government have changed, and they've started asking pointed questions about why experienced prosecutors are suddenly being replaced by less experienced attorneys who seem less familiar with the case files. In one instance in Washington, D.C., a federal judge openly questioned whether the DOJ was capable of continuing to prosecute a complex conspiracy case after learning that 2 of the 3 lead prosecutors had resigned. The judge didn't say it outright, but the implication was clear. If the government can't field a stable legal team, how can the court trust that justice is being served? And it gets worse, because these resignations are happening at the exact moment when Trump's own personal legal exposure is at its peak. His legal team is facing critical deadlines in multiple jurisdictions. There are active appeals in the January 6th cases. There are ongoing investigations into his business practices in New York. There are civil suits related to his conduct in office. And there's the massive question of whether he can claim immunity for actions he took as president. And now the very department that's supposed to be defending the executive branch's legal positions is hemorrhaging the people who actually know how to make those arguments in court. But here's the problem, and this goes way deeper than just personnel issues. The Department of Justice is supposed to operate under a principle that's been in place since Watergate, and really since the founding of the Republic in different forms. That principle is prosecutorial independence. The idea is simple. The Attorney General and the DOJ answer to the law first and to the President second. Yes, the Attorney General is appointed by the President. Yes, the DOJ is part of the executive branch. But there's supposed to be a firewall between political considerations and prosecutorial decisions. That firewall exists because if the president can simply order the Justice Department to drop cases against his allies or to pursue cases against his enemies, then you don't have a justice system anymore. You have a weapon. You have a tool of political power. And every authoritarian government in history has understood this. Control the prosecutors, control the courts, and you control the ability to punish dissent and reward loyalty. That's why, after Watergate, after Nixon tried to use the Justice Department to go after his political opponents and to shield himself from investigation, the DOJ established internal guidelines that are supposed to protect career prosecutors from political interference. Those guidelines say that decisions about whether to charge someone, whether to drop a case, whether to appeal a verdict, those decisions are supposed to be made by career prosecutors based on the facts and the law, not by political appointees based on what the White House wants. And what we're seeing now is the collapse of that firewall in real time. Trump has made no secret of the fact that he believes the Justice Department should be loyal to him personally. He's said it in interviews, he's said it on social media, he's said it in private meetings that have leaked to the press. He's called the DOJ my Justice Department. He's demanded investigations into his political opponents. He's raged against prosecutors who've pursued cases against him or his allies. And now, in his second term, he's installed loyalists at the top of the department who are willing to push career lawyers to take positions that those lawyers believe violate their ethical obligations and the rule of law. And that's what's triggered these resignations. Because for a career prosecutor, your reputation is everything. You stand up in court and make an argument that you know is legally unsound. If you ask a judge to dismiss a case for reasons that have nothing to do with the merits and everything to do with politics, you're not just risking losing that case. You're risking your credibility with every judge you'll ever appear before again. You're risking your law license. You're risking your ability to look at yourself in the mirror and say you did your job with integrity. And when it becomes clear that staying at the DOJ means sacrificing that integrity, a lot of lawyers are going to walk away. And that's exactly what's happening, okay? Let's break down what this actually means. First, understand that these resignations represent a direct challenge to Trump's authority, not in a political sense, but in a structural, institutional sense. When career prosecutors resign en masse rather than follow orders from the White House, they're sending a message not just to Trump, but to federal judges, to Congress, to the legal community, and to the American public. The message is, what the administration is asking us to do crosses a line. It's one thing for political appointees to set priorities, to decide which types of cases the department focuses on. That's normal. That happens with every administration. But it's another thing entirely to tell career lawyers to make arguments in court that they believe are false, or to drop cases for political reasons. And when prosecutors resign over that, judges notice, the legal community notices, and it creates a kind of institutional resistance that's very hard for any president to overcome, because judges don't have to follow orders from the White House. They follow the law. And if DOJ lawyers come into court and make arguments that seem politically motivated rather than legally sound, judges are going to be skeptical. They're going to ask harder questions. They're going to be less likely to defer to the government's position. And that makes it harder for Trump to win the legal battles that he desperately needs to win to protect himself and his agenda. Second, this creates a massive problem for Trump's legal team in terms of sheer capacity. When you lose 7 or more senior lawyers in a short period of time, you can't just snap your fingers and replace them with people of equal skill and experience. The legal profession doesn't work that way. The lawyers who are resigning have been working on these cases for months or years. They know the facts, they know the witnesses, they know the legal arguments inside and out. Bringing in new lawyers means those lawyers have to get up to speed, and that takes time. And time is something Trump doesn't have. There are court deadlines approaching in multiple cases. There are appeals that need to be filed. There are motions that need to be responded to. And if the DOJ can't field a competent legal team because it's lost its experienced prosecutors, then Trump is going to start losing cases not because the law is against him, but because his own side can't present a coherent legal strategy. And here's the kicker. The lawyers who are willing to come in and replace the ones who resigned are probably going to be less experienced, less credible, and more willing to make questionable legal arguments because they're more loyal to Trump than to the rule of law. And that's going to make it even easier for judges to rule against the administration. Third, this is a political disaster heading into 2026. Republicans are already nervous about Trump's legal troubles and how they're going to play in the midterms. The party doesn't want to spend the next 2 years defending a president who's constantly embroiled in court battles, who's losing cases, who's being accused of politicizing the Justice Department. And now, you have this mass resignation of career prosecutors, which is going to be framed by Democrats and by the media as evidence that Trump is trying to corrupt the justice system. Democrats are going to run ads showing these resignations. They're going to quote the prosecutors who are speaking out about why they left. They're going to argue that Trump is a threat to the rule of law, that he's trying to turn the DOJ into his personal legal defense team, that he's undermining the independence of federal law enforcement. And moderate voters, independents, people who maybe voted for Trump because they didn't like Biden or because they wanted change, those voters don't like the idea of a president who's above the law. They don't like the idea of a president who's using the Justice Department as a political weapon. So this gives Democrats a very powerful narrative to run on, and it puts Republicans in a defensive position where they have to either defend Trump's actions, which makes them look like they're okay with corruption, or distance themselves from Trump, which fractures the party and weakens him politically. Fourth, this has huge implications for how other parts of the federal government are going to respond. When career employees at the Justice Department resign in protest, it sends a signal to career employees at other agencies. It tells them that it's possible to push back, that there are lines you don't have to cross, that you can walk away if the political leadership is asking you to do something you believe is wrong. And that creates a culture of resistance within the federal bureaucracy that's going to make it harder for Trump to implement his agenda across the board, not just on legal issues. We've already seen this in other contexts. Career diplomats at the State Department have pushed back against Trump's foreign policy decisions. Career scientists at federal agencies have pushed back against attempts to suppress research or to change regulations for political reasons. Career law enforcement officials at the FBI and other agencies have leaked information to the press when they believed the White House was acting improperly. And now, you have career prosecutors at the DOJ doing the same thing. And the cumulative effect of all of this is that Trump is governing with a federal workforce that doesn't trust him, that's actively looking for ways to slow down or undermine his policies, and that's willing to sacrifice their careers to do it. And that makes him a much weaker president than he would be if he had the institutional support of the people who actually run the government on a day-to-day basis. Fifth, let's talk about what this means internationally, because this isn't just a domestic issue. When foreign governments and international courts see that the U.S. Justice Department is in turmoil, when they see career prosecutors resigning because they believe the system is being corrupted, it undermines America's credibility on the world stage. The United States has spent decades lecturing other countries about the rule of law, about judicial independence, about not using the legal system for political purposes. We've imposed sanctions on countries where the government controls the courts. We've criticized authoritarian regimes for imprisoning political opponents on trumped-up charges. We've supported international efforts to strengthen the rule of law in developing democracies. And now we have a situation where our own Justice Department is falling apart because the president is trying to politicize it. How do we tell other countries to respect judicial independence when we can't maintain it ourselves? How do we criticize other governments for corruption when our own prosecutors are resigning in protest? And this matters in concrete ways. When the U.S. goes to international courts or tries to negotiate treaties or enforce sanctions, other countries look at whether we're credible. If they think our legal system is compromised, if they think our Justice Department is just a tool of whoever's in the White House, they're less likely to cooperate with us. They're less likely to extradite criminals to the U.S. They're less likely to enforce judgments from U.S. courts. They're less likely to take us seriously when we talk about human rights and democracy. So this isn't just about Trump and his legal problems. This is about America's standing in the world and our ability to lead on issues that require international cooperation and trust in our institutions. Sixth, we need to talk about what happens next in the courts themselves. Federal judges are watching this very carefully, and judges, especially federal judges who have lifetime appointments and who don't answer to any president, have a lot of power to push back when they think the Justice Department is acting improperly. We're already seeing some of this. Judges are asking pointed questions about why DOJ lawyers are changing positions on cases. They're demanding explanations for why the government is suddenly making arguments that seem inconsistent with previous filings. They're expressing skepticism when new DOJ lawyers come in and try to drop cases or change legal strategies without clear justification. And if judges start to lose trust in the DOJ, they're going to be much less willing to defer to the government's arguments. That's a big deal because in a lot of cases, especially cases involving executive power or national security, judges will give the government the benefit of the doubt. They'll assume that DOJ lawyers are acting in good faith and that their legal positions are reasonable. But if judges think the DOJ is being run for political purposes, that deference goes away. And that means Trump is going to lose more cases. It means the administration is going to have a harder time defending its policies in court. And it means that even when the administration has a legitimate legal argument, judges are going to be skeptical of it because they don't trust the people making the argument. And that's a problem that's going to last beyond Trump's presidency, because once you lose the trust of the federal judiciary, it takes years, sometimes decades, to rebuild it. Seventh, this raises really serious questions about what happens if Trump tries to pardon himself or his allies in some of these cases. One of the reasons these prosecutors are so concerned is that they've seen signals that the White House is considering blanket pardons for January 6th defendants, or even preemptive pardons for people who haven't been charged yet, but who might be exposed to legal liability. And if Trump issues those pardons, it's going to create a constitutional crisis because it will look like he's using the pardon power to obstruct justice, to protect himself and his allies from accountability. Now, the president does have the constitutional power to issue pardons. That's clear. But there are limits to how that power can be used. If a president issues a pardon as part of a corrupt scheme, if he's using the pardon power to cover up crimes or to reward people for not cooperating with investigations, that can be grounds for impeachment. It can be evidence of obstruction of justice. And the fact that career prosecutors are resigning now, before those pardons are even issued, suggests that they believe something like that is coming and that they don't want to be part of it. And if Trump does issue blanket pardons for January 6th defendants or for people connected to his own legal troubles, you're going to see an explosion of outrage from Democrats, from civil society groups, from legal experts, and quite possibly from some Republicans who believe in the rule of law. And that could be the thing that finally breaks Republican support for Trump in Congress, because there are limits to how much even a very loyal party will tolerate when it comes to a president using his powers to protect himself from criminal accountability. Eighth, let's talk about the economic and market dimensions of this, because, believe it or not, this kind of institutional instability does affect markets and investor confidence. When investors see that the Justice Department is in chaos, when they see career prosecutors resigning, when they see the president trying to interfere with legal processes, it creates uncertainty. And markets hate uncertainty. Investors want to know that there are stable rules, that contracts will be enforced, that disputes will be resolved fairly by an independent judiciary. If they start to think that the legal system is being politicized, that the Justice Department is just a tool of whoever's in power, then they have to price in the risk that the rules could change at any time based on political considerations rather than legal principles. And that makes the U.S. a less attractive place to invest. It makes American companies less competitive internationally. It undermines the dollar's status as the global reserve currency, because that status depends in part on trust in American institutions, including the legal system. We've already seen some volatility in markets related to Trump's legal troubles and his attempts to consolidate power. And if this situation with the DOJ gets worse, if more prosecutors resign, if judges start openly questioning the integrity of the Justice Department, you could see more significant market reactions. And that would put pressure on Trump from the business community, from Wall Street, from corporate CEOs who don't want to see their stock prices tank because the president is fighting with the Justice Department. So here's the bottom line. What we're watching is the breakdown of one of the most important norms in American democracy, the independence of the Justice Department from political interference. These resignations are not just about individual lawyers making career decisions. They're about career prosecutors collectively deciding that they can't do their jobs with integrity under this administration, and they're willing to walk away rather than be part of what they see as the corruption of the legal system. And the consequences of this are going to be enormous. Trump's legal team is weaker now, less capable of defending him in court, and less credible with federal judges. His political standing is damaged because this gives Democrats a powerful narrative about Trump being a threat to the rule of law. His ability to govern is compromised because career employees across the federal government are seeing that it's possible to resist, to push back, to refuse to follow orders that they believe are improper. America's international credibility is undermined because foreign governments are watching this and concluding that we can't lecture them about judicial independence when we can't maintain it ourselves. And the entire institutional framework that's supposed to protect the legal system from political abuse is under strain in ways that we haven't seen since Watergate. This is a full-blown crisis, and it's only going to get worse from here. And here's the thing. This story is far from over. We're going to see more resignations. We're going to see judges pushing back harder against DOJ lawyers who are making politically motivated arguments. We're going to see Democrats in Congress launching investigations into why these prosecutors resigned and what orders they were given. We're going to see leaks from inside the Justice Department about what's really happening behind closed doors. We're going to see Trump lashing out, attacking the prosecutors who resigned, maybe trying to retaliate against them in some way. And we're going to see this play out in courtrooms across the country as Trump's legal troubles continue to mount and as his weakened legal team struggles to defend him. So keep your eyes on this. Watch what federal judges say in their rulings over the next few weeks. Watch whether more prosecutors resign, or whether some of the ones who resigned start speaking out publicly about what they saw. Watch how Republicans in Congress respond, whether they're willing to defend Trump, or whether some of them start to distance themselves. Watch what happens in the courts as Trump's cases move forward, and as the DOJ tries to function without some of its most experienced lawyers. Because what's happening right now could define not just Trump's presidency, not just the 2026 midterms, but the future of the American legal system for decades to come. This is about whether we're a country where the law applies equally to everyone, including the president, or whether we're a country where the president can use the legal system as a weapon to protect himself and to punish his enemies. The answer to that question is being written right now, in the decisions that prosecutors are making to resign, in the rulings that judges are making in courtrooms, and in the political battles that are about to explode over what Trump is trying to do to the Justice Department. So stay vigilant, stay informed, and don't let anyone tell you this is just about a few lawyers leaving their jobs. This is about the soul of American democracy.